Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. 20 years ago, on October the 7th, 2001, the U.S. and its allies invaded Afghanistan and later installed a Washington-backed administration composed mostly of personalities educated in the U.S. and other Western countries. Justice for the 9/11 attacks on American soil was the pretext of the war. Studies estimate the total death toll at more than 176,000. At least 47,000 Afghan civilians that lost their lives. Probably the number is much bigger than that. The real number of Afghan deaths is likely much higher due to disease and hunger made worse with the conflict. Afghans suffered the most, bearing the brunt of the decades of violence. In August, the Taliban took control of Afghan capital, and then on August 30th, the U.S. withdrew its latest forces from Afghanistan, a chaotic end to the 20-year war. On Thursday, the Afghan interim government issued a statement on 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of the country, saying the invasion brought nothing but misery to millions of Afghans. They said that the destiny of Afghanistan must be decided by the Afghan people. So how can Afghans recover from the pain of war? What is the state of the country now? How will they determine their own destiny if they really can? Let's ask our panelists. 20 years anniversary of war in Afghanistan. We are joined in Washington, D.C. on the phone. Peter Kuznick, professor of history with American University in Beijing. We have Professor Li Guofu, who is the director of the Center for Middle East Studies at China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Professor Kuznick, on the phone with us from Washington. Tell me more about this 20-year war. What does that mean for the U.S. rethinking of its strategy overseas? Briefly.
The United States has not really begun rethinking its strategy and its priorities. The focus is somewhere else right now. The United States is not good at learning the lessons of war. It took a long time to learn the lessons of Vietnam, and they were still never learned. And now we've blundered into one war after another. This war, as you say, is a humanitarian disaster for the people of Afghanistan, a waste of trillions and trillions of dollars for the United States and the world, and an example of why this kind of military interventions do not solve problems. So I think that's the lesson that we have to learn from this. This is one, the United States, since World War II, has gotten involved in one episode after another.
Right.
And you don't find human solutions through military means.
There are broken voices. We try to catch up with you a bit later. But, you know, one of the things is what about the state of the country right now in Afghanistan? Professor Li here with us in the studio. The Taliban has yet to win any international recognition. So how do you see this transition? What is likely to be the status of this interim government and the country?
I think since now we have almost 2 months since Taliban totally and control the country and set of they call the temporary and the government. And after Taliban took over the country so far, we can see that some progress at least has been made. And the country, there's no war. I mean, the sizable or large war, including, some, the resistance at the initial stage. But generally, the country keep quiet. And also, you can see, the Taliban has changed its mission from a mountaineer fighter, not to be a uniformed police to patrol, the country or the capital in order to keep quiet. Generally, I think this is what we may call, some positive developments.
It's very interesting to see this mixture. On the one hand, it seems that there is an apparent peace for most of the Afghans right now.
Yeah.
And things are going in a smooth direction, but a lot of people still worry so much because of the track record of the Taliban and because of the country's international status, Professor Lee.
I think, at the same time we say that, we see some positive, but also some disappointing some developments, especially, it's a treatment to the female, especially the girls. They are not allowed the girls to, go to, the high school. They have sacked so far most of the female government employees, asked them back to home. And also, some regulations have very strict, with regard to the women's rights. Now, this is not, generally speaking, not in the right direction. And also they have been, not to keep what they have promised to the people. So this is regarded one of the major, issue people are concerned with, the current government's policies.
Okay, Professor Kuznick, let me try once again to you about, many are asking what is likely to be this strategy coming out of Afghanistan about how is it going to work with the rest of the world while at the same time need to fight the war against the terrorism. Professor Kuznick, your take?
Well, we're waiting to see. The rest of the world has effectively cut off all foreign aid, waiting to see how the government performs. That is creating a further humanitarian disaster inside Afghanistan. The country was heavily dependent on outside aid to fund itself for the past 20 years. So maybe 70 or 80 or 90% of the budget was coming from the outside of Afghanistan. That's been cut off. What we're seeing as a result is a lot of chaos, very heavy unemployment, refugees both inside and outside the country, and this Taliban coming in and without having a lot of recent history of governing, trying to put this together. And so it's an almost impossible situation. And the suffering inside of Afghanistan now is really out of control. And so people don't have jobs. The banks are not providing money. And people in many places don't have housing. And there's 20 years of destruction. So I'm very worried about the situation in Afghanistan.
One could argue now the situation is not necessarily worse, but almost similar to the earlier 20 years. But another question about against the terrorism, Professor Lee, we only have 1 minute left. Recently we saw some raids against the ISIS. Of course, we know the Taliban and the ISIS were traditionally enemies, but what does that say about really the determination from the Taliban against the terrorism, particularly terrorism that are still booming in the area, Professor?
I think this is a very positive side. Recently, we have, the weakness, some bombs, caused by these terrorist organizations, which make, Taliban to determine to terminate this terrorist organization. I believe this is a positive side.
But as we know, ISIS traditionally are the enemies of the Taliban, but not necessarily the other groups that some consider as terrorist groups. So, Professor, how do you see those issues?
I think this is the preconditions for not only the recognition of Taliban legitimacy, but also, the aid international provided to Taliban. And also Taliban has made a sort of a promise to the international communities. Right. So I believe step by step, Taliban will take some measures against these terrorist organizations.
We'll see how things would go from here. Thank you so much. Professor Li Guofu and Professor Peter Kuznick joining us from Beijing and Washington. You're watching World Insight. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now. Thank you.